Would somebody move him, please? I can smell the shop on him from here.
The seat is mine. My daughter is in that row.
Then take her and the arts and crafts with you. Nothing about either of you is first class.
At 10 minutes to 2 on a Thursday afternoon, a man in a work coat that had been washed past its color gave up seat 2A in the first-class cabin of a full airplane. He had paid for that seat a month earlier. The woman who took it never read the name printed on his boarding pass. 29 people in the front of that airplane heard every word of it. Not one of them asked to see a ticket. They did not think they needed to. The coat had already told them what he was worth. Denton Foster did not argue with her. He folded his boarding pass in half, and then in half again, and set it down on the armrest. Then he lifted the cardboard box out of his 9-year-old daughter's hands, so she would not have to carry it past everybody who had just watched. Her hands were shaking. She was working very hard at not letting them. Then the gate supervisor typed 9 keystrokes, and the record became official. It now said that Denton Foster had agreed. He had not agreed. His boarding pass still said seat 2A. He had asked twice for the reason in writing. He had been refused twice. Here is what nobody at that gate knew. 9 years earlier, Denton Foster had sat in a windowless room 2 miles from that terminal and helped write the list those codes come from. 11 codes, and he could still say them in order. He knew exactly which one they had just used. And he knew it was the only one on the whole list that required the passenger to say yes out loud. Denton Foster was a single dad. His daughter was 9 years old. And she had 4 hours and 40 minutes to be somewhere that would not wait for her. And this was not the first time Sylvia Renwick had taken a seat this way. It had worked every time she had ever tried it. Same gate, same route, same account number on the receiving end. Nobody had ever asked her to wait for anything. She had 4 hours and 40 minutes left of that being true. So there were 2 roads in front of him that afternoon. Only one of them got her there on time. His name was Denton Foster. He was 44, and he had raised his daughter alone since she was 9 months old. For 9 years, he had worked the 11 to 7 maintenance shift at Cleveland Hopkins. He knew that airport the way a man knows a house he has walked through in the dark. Denton came to the gate straight off a double. The work coat had been navy once. Now it was the color of weather. A thin line of oil lived in the creases of his right hand. He had stopped scrubbing at it years ago. His daughter was named Wren. Wren was 9. She carried a cardboard box against her chest, the way you carry a thing you do not trust to a strap. The box held a working model of a river lock. Wren had built it over 4 months on the kitchen table. It did what a real lock does. It raised a boat without raising the river. Wren was flying to the National Junior Exhibition in Boston. Exhibitor check-in closed at 6:30 that evening. Not 6:40, 6:30. And then the list was the list. North Bend Airways Flight 1418 was the last non-stop that got her there in time. Denton had bought 2 first-class seats a month earlier, seat 2A and seat 2B, front row. He paid the extra seat fee to put the 2 of them side by side, because Wren was 9, and a 9-year-old with a cardboard box should not sit alone in a seat behind a stranger. Denton had traded a shift to get the weekend off and owed another man a Saturday for it. These are the arrangements a single father makes. They are invisible, and they cost what they cost. Boarding started. Wren took the aisle seat. Denton took the window seat. He had printed their boarding passes on paper at a kiosk that morning, the way he always did. Wren slid the box under the seat in front of her, then took it back out and held it. "You can hold it," Denton said. "Nobody's going to make you put it down." Wren held it. He checked both boarding passes one more time anyway, because he checked everything twice. If you have ever stood in a room where the decision about you was already made and nobody thought to ask you anything, stay with Denton Foster, a single dad in a work coat, for the next half hour. If this channel keeps telling stories about the people nobody looks at twice, hit subscribe. Here is something worth saying plainly. Nobody at that gate hated Denton Foster. Hatred at least requires that you notice a man. What happened ran on the ordinary daily habit of sorting people by what they look like they are worth. Fast, without thinking. The way a person sorts mail. You can argue with a man who hates you because at least he is looking at you. There is nothing to push against in someone who has decided you are not the part of the room that matters. For 11 minutes, it was the easiest flight either of them had ever taken. Then a woman in a pale coat stopped in the aisle beside row 2 and looked at Denton's shoes. Her name was Sylvia Renwick. She was 51. She held the corporate travel contract for a firm that put 400 employees in the air every month. She did not lower her voice, and that is the thing to understand about her. She was not embarrassed. People get embarrassed when it occurs to them they might be wrong. That had not occurred to her in 20 years. She looked at the seat number above the window. Then she looked at Denton's coat. Then she looked at the coat again, a little longer, the way a person reads a price tag twice. "You're in my seat," she said. 2A. "I am. I sit in 2A. I have sat in 2A on this flight for 6 years. They have put me in 3C, next to the service door." She was still looking at the coat. "And please do not tell me you paid for it. I can see what you paid for." Denton held up his boarding pass so she could see the number. He said nothing. He had learned long ago that a document argues better than a man does. She did not look at it. She opened her wallet and counted out bills the way a person tips a valet, without looking up. "What does a man in that coat need? 200? Say a number." "It isn't for sale. My daughter's in that row." Then she turned her head toward the rows behind her and said the next part at a volume that was a decision. "People buy these seats. They don't win them." Somewhere back around row 4, a man laughed. Not a big laugh. The small one people use when they want to be counted on the winning side, without saying anything themselves. Wren heard all of it. She did not look up. Her ears had gone red, and she had pulled the box in tight against her chest, and she was sitting very carefully still, the way a child sits when she has worked out that being noticed is the thing to avoid. Denton put his hand flat on the armrest between them, which was as close as he could get to putting it around her without making it worse. That was the moment. Not the money, and not the coat. It was Sylvia Renwick understanding that this would take somebody else, and knowing that she had somebody else, and always had. She turned toward the front of the cabin and lifted 2 fingers. Terrence Boyle came down the aisle. He was 38 and had run that gate for 8 years, and he was 4 weeks out from the review that decided whether he kept the shift he wanted. Sylvia did not ask him for the seat. She said something else instead, at exactly the same volume. "I'm not asking you for a seat. I'm telling your airline what kind of afternoon this can be. 400 people a month in that contract. I'd like the front row. Now." Boyle asked to see both boarding passes. This is the part that mattered, and almost nobody registered it. He held Denton's pass in his left hand and Sylvia's in his right. Denton's said 2A. Sylvia's said 3C, the aisle seat in the last row of first class. The paper was the simplest thing on that airplane. Boyle looked at it for 2 full seconds. Then he looked at the screen instead because the paper could not be changed, and the screen could. Denton tried the quiet way first. It is worth being clear about that because of what people said afterward. Put us anywhere, he said. 9, 22, the last row by the lavatory. I don't care where. 2 seats together and we're gone. There is nothing together, Boyle said, which was true. Then put her in 2A and give the lady 2B. Sylvia said no to that before Boyle could answer. She was not going to sit for 2 hours beside somebody's cardboard box, and she said it the way a person mentions an allergy. So it came down to the only version she would accept, the one where a 9-year-old sat alone. Denton asked Boyle a question then, flatly, the way you ask a man for the time. What's the operational reason? Boyle said the airline reserved the right to reassign seats. That isn't a reason, that's a sentence. Write the reason down. There is a rule underneath this, and it is not a courtesy. When an airline takes a confirmed seat against the passenger's will, and it goes far enough to become a denied boarding, the carrier has to hand him a written statement. Right there, at the gate. The terms and the priority rules it used to choose him. Not email it that evening. Hand it over. Denton knew that. He had read it in a training module 9 years ago. A man who has read the rule asks for the paper before anyone thinks to produce it. If this ends up being a denied boarding, you owe me that in writing anyway, he said. So start now. Write the reason. Boyle said it wasn't necessary. Denton asked a second time. His voice stayed exactly where it was. He said, I'm asking you on the record. Put the reason in the field. Boyle said that if this continued, he would have to call the airport police. And that was it. Denton Foster stopped asking. He took the paper boarding pass out of his shirt pocket and folded it in half, and then in half again, squaring the corners the way a man folds something he means to keep. He set it down on the armrest. Then he unbuckled his belt and stood and took the box. Boyle typed 9 keystrokes. Sylvia stepped back to let them out of the row. She looked at the box in his arms, and then at the 9-year-old walking behind it, and she said the last thing she would ever say to either of them. Careful with the arts and crafts, sweetheart. Nobody in that cabin said a word. A woman in row 3 looked down into her lap. That was the part Denton remembered longest. Not the sentence, but the 11 seconds behind it, in which 29 grown adults decided this was not their business. Then Sylvia Renwick sat down in 2A and rested her hand on the folded boarding pass without once reading the name printed inside it. Here is the distinction the rest of this story turns on. A rude person is a bad afternoon. You go home, you tell somebody, and in a year it is a story you tell badly at a party. A record is a different animal. A record does not go home. It sits in a system overnight, and in the morning it is not what somebody said about you. It is simply what happened. At the door of the aircraft, Denton stopped and looked back once, not at the seat and not at the woman in it. He looked at the screen in Boyle's hand. 4 hours and 10 minutes left. And there, in a field almost nobody on Earth looks at, were 3 letters. V-O-L. Nobody walked them back out to the terminal. They were parked in the jet bridge, in that stretch of ribbed tunnel between the gate door and the airplane, while somebody looked for 2 seats that did not exist. It is a bad place to stand. The light is hard. The walls are metal. Every sound the airplane makes comes up the tunnel and sits on top of you. The agent holding the handheld was named Ivy Okonkwo. She was 24 and 6 months into the job, which meant she was still the person they sent to stand with the passenger nobody wanted to talk to. She was scrolling. Denton was standing close enough to see the screen, and Ivy was too new to have learned to angle it away. He was not trying to read it. He read it the way a plumber reads a wet ceiling, without deciding to. The seat field was empty. The status field said unassigned. And in the reason field, small, 3 characters wide, were the letters he had known were coming since the aisle. V, O, L. Wren had gone very quiet. She was standing with her back against the tunnel wall, holding the box, and she had not asked a single question since row 2. Then she asked one. "Dad?" She did not look up. "Are we the kind of people this happens to?" Denton crouched down so their eyes were level. He did not answer it the way a man answers a child. He answered it the way he would have answered a man. "No," he said. "We're the kind of people it gets written down about." She thought about that. "Is that worse?" "It lasts longer." He stood up. And then he did the arithmetic. And the arithmetic is the whole reason this story is worth telling. If he said nothing, they were on that airplane. 2 middle seats, 11 rows apart, but on it. Wheels up at 2:40. Boston at 4:25. His daughter walks into the exhibition hall with 2 hours to spare and puts a working river lock on a table with her name on it. If he said the thing he was standing there knowing, that airplane was not going anywhere. Not at 2:40. Maybe not for hours. And the desk in Boston closed at 6:30, and the list was the list. Nobody would ever have known. That is the part worth sitting with. There was no version of that afternoon where anyone found out what he chose in that tunnel. The only other person who could have was sitting in his seat with her hand on his boarding pass. There are men who would have gotten on that airplane. Denton had been one of them for 9 years. Ivy looked up from the handheld. She saw where his eyes were. She saw that he had already read it, and that he understood the field, and that he had not said anything yet. She did not say anything either, but she stopped scrolling. He walked back up the tunnel to the gate counter. He did not hurry, and he never got loud. And afterward, 3 people said the same thing about it. They did not notice him coming. Boyle was at the podium, already on to the next thing. Denton said 7 words. "Pull the override log for 2A. Boyle looked up. "Excuse me?" "The override log. 2A. Pull it." "Sir, you don't get to hand out orders behind this counter. I'm not giving you an instruction. I'm telling you what's in it." An override code is a short number an agent types in to explain why they changed something in the record. That is all it is. Most of them mean the airline decided. Weather, equipment swap, weight restriction. There is exactly one that does not mean the airline decided. "There are 11 codes on that list," Denton said. 9 years ago, I sat on the team that wrote them. You used VOL. That's the only one on the whole list that means the passengers said yes. 9 years ago is worth going back to, because it is the only place in this story that is not that Thursday. He was a systems technician then on a build team, and the job that year was the reason code list. 11 lines on a whiteboard. They argued about them for 6 weeks. He remembered the sentence the project manager kept saying, because the man said it the way other people say grace. Write it so a tired person at 3 in the morning cannot lie by accident. Wren was 4 months old that spring. Her mother Elaine was still alive that spring, and would not be by the fall. And after the fall, a man on a build team with a 9-month-old learned very fast what a job with travel in it costs. So he took the night shift at the airport instead. 11 to 7. Home by breakfast. 9 years of it. That is the whole flashback. It is short because he never made much of it. Here is something true about people who build systems, and it is not what most people assume. They are not proud of them. They are frightened of them. A man who has only ever used a system trusts it because it has never once failed in front of him. A man who helped build one knows the exact place it can be leaned on. He knows because he was in the room the day somebody said, out loud, "What happens if an agent just picks this one?" And somebody else said, "Nobody would do that." Boyle's face did something complicated. "Anyone can say they wrote software," he said. "Then pull the log and prove I'm wrong. It's 4 seconds. Boyle did not move. Ivy Okonkwo moved. She had been at the podium the whole time, with her hands at her sides. She reached past her supervisor and pulled the log. It came up in 4 seconds. It had been sitting there the entire time, the way paperwork does. The log said what he said it said. 1 entry, time-stamped at 2:11, under Boyle's sign-in. Seat 2A, reassigned. Reason code, VOL. Passenger accepted. There was no signature attached to it. There was no note. There was nothing at all, because there was nothing to attach. "That's a data entry," Boyle said. "It isn't a crime." "I know. That's not the part I'm worried about." And then Denton Foster asked the question that emptied an airplane. "Where does the weight go?" Ivy picked up the interphone. Camille Vargas came down from the flight deck 4 minutes later. She was 47, 19 years on the line, and by her own count she had signed her name to something over 11,000 load sheets. She had never once been asked about one in a jet bridge. A load sheet is the page the captain signs before a flight leaves. It is not a list of what the airplane weighs. It is a picture of where the weight is sitting. Front, middle, back. Bags below, people above. An airplane does not care very much how heavy it is, within reason. It cares enormously where the heavy parts are. The seat map is one of the inputs, not decoration. Vargas listened to about 40 seconds of it. She was not a woman who needed a story told twice. "Say the last part again?" "The record says the passenger in 2A accepted a move to an unassigned seat," Denton said. He didn't. So either the record is wrong about where he is, or it's wrong about what he agreed to. Probably both. Your sheet is built off that record. Vargas turned to Boyle and asked him one question. And it was not an angry question. It was the flat kind, the kind that has a form to fill out behind it. "Is the seat map on my sheet the seat map of the people actually in my airplane?" Boyle said that everyone had been scanned at the door. "That's a count. I didn't ask about the count. I asked whether the map is right." Boyle said the map was as right as it usually was. There is a regulation about who decides at that point, and it is 1 line long. The pilot in command is directly responsible for and is the final authority as to the operation of that aircraft. Not the gate, not the supervisor, not the woman with 400 employees in a contract. 2 hours and 55 minutes left. Vargas handed the sheet back across the podium. 206 bags in the hold. 172 people in the seats. 4 crew. 12,000 pounds of fuel. And 1 page of paper that no longer matched any of them. "I'm not signing a picture of an airplane that doesn't exist," she said. "Get them off." The announcement in the cabin was 11 words long and explained nothing. All passengers were asked to gather their belongings and step off the aircraft. A cabin does not receive news like that quietly. It guesses. Somebody said engine, somebody said security. A man in row 9 told the people around him that this was standard for a bird strike, with great authority, having never in his life seen a bird strike. Sylvia Renwick did not stand up. She told the flight attendant she was not moving until somebody told her why a whole airplane was being emptied over a delay that had begun, she pointed out, only after the difficult passenger was gone. The flight attendant said, "Everybody." She said it twice. So Sylvia Renwick gathered her coat and her leather case and stood up. She walked off that airplane in a line, in the middle of it, behind a man with a neck pillow, in front of a college kid asleep on his feet. It was the first thing that had happened to her that day that she had not arranged. At the aircraft door, they did it by hand. 172 people, every one of them holding up a boarding pass. Name read out. Name found on the list. Name checked. Then the next one. It took 22 minutes, and it looked like the least dramatic thing in the world, which is what verification usually looks like. Sylvia stepped out of the airplane into the tunnel. And there, halfway up, under that hard light, was the captain of her flight standing beside the man in the oil-stained coat. And the captain was the one who was listening. She stopped walking. People went around her. This is the place to say the plainest thing in this story. 29 people watched a man be moved out of a seat he had paid for. They heard what was said about the shop on him. They heard what was said to his daughter about her arts and crafts. Not one of them asked to see a ticket. Not one of them was a bad person. They were tired, and it was not their business, and somebody in a uniform seemed to have it in hand. Cruelty almost never needs more cruel people. It runs perfectly well on ordinary busy ones. That is why it keeps working. Nobody applauded when they came off that airplane. There was no moment. There were 172 irritated people in a gate area with dead phones, and one of them was starting to ask why. Stay with this. What he said to that gate area in the next 90 seconds is the part he was still answering for at 11 o'clock that night. He did not go up to the podium. He stood by a pillar near the window and talked for a little under 2 minutes. And he did not once get louder. "This isn't about a seat," he said. "I want to be clear about that, because you're all going to be late and you deserve to know what for." Somebody near the charging station told him to speak up. He did not. The record says I agreed to be moved. I didn't agree. I asked twice for the reason in writing, and I was refused twice. You let that sit for a second. That would just be an insult, except for what the record does next. The captain signs a page that says where every person on this airplane is sitting. She builds it off that record. If the record will say a man agreed to something he never agreed to, then it will say a man is sitting somewhere he isn't. And she's the one who has to put her name on it. A woman near the front said, quietly, "Oh." "I would have flown," Denton said. "I wanted to fly. My daughter has to be at a desk in Boston at 6:30 tonight, and this was the last airplane that got her there. I'm telling you that because I want you to know exactly what this cost, and that I'd do it again." Sylvia Renwick had been at the edge of the group for most of it. She spoke then. Her voice had not changed at all, and it carried. She said this was a spectacle. She said her corporate agreement with this airline was worth more than everyone in that gate area put together, and that after today, she would be recommending it go somewhere else. Denton did not answer her. He answered the room. "That's the leverage," he said. "That's the whole mechanism. It isn't a villain. It's 400 seats a month and a supervisor with a review in 4 weeks. Then he turned to her, and this is what he did not do. He did not repeat what she had said about being able to smell the shop on him. He did not repeat what she had said to a 9-year-old about arts and crafts. He did not mention the wallet or the bills counted out like a tip. He did not mention the coat or the shoes or the hand she had rested on his boarding pass without reading it. He did not point out to 172 witnesses that she was about to lose a great deal more than a seat. He said one thing: "I never wanted the seat. I wanted the sentence taken back." 54 minutes left. Wren was standing next to him the whole time with the box against her chest and her free hand in his. She had worked out by then that she was not going to Boston. She did not cry, and she did not let go. And later on, that was the detail people remembered. 2 rows of seats back, a woman in a red raincoat had her phone up and had been recording since the word refused, which is how the rest of the country eventually heard about a gate agent in Cleveland and 3 letters in a field. An override log does not only hold today. The airline's duty manager pulled 8 months of them, sorted by agent sign-in, while 172 people watched a departure board and a 9-year-old sat on the floor with a cardboard box. Under Terrence Boyle's sign-in, in 8 months, the code that means the passenger said yes had been used 14 times. Not one of the 14 had a signature attached. Not one had a note or a follow-up. 14 clean little entries, and every one of them was somebody's afternoon. And they all ran the same direction. Nobody had ever been moved out of the back and into first class. 14 times out of 14, the person who lost the seat was the one the file said less about. No status, no account number, no contract. There was one account number that kept turning up, though. Not on the side that lost the seat, on the side that got it. 5 of the 14 ended with Sylvia Renwick sitting in the chair. One is a mistake. Anybody can have a bad Thursday at a keyboard. 14 in a row, all leaning the same way, is not a mistake. It is a habit. And a habit that survives 8 months in a system that logs everything is not really a habit at all. It is a thing somebody decided not to look at. Sylvia Renwick was not arrested and was not humiliated. And she did not cry. Because that is not what happens. She was taken off Flight 1418 and told she would not be rebooked on it. Her firm's corporate account was suspended that evening, pending a review of all 5. Her own board asked her about it on Monday, which is the part she had not planned for. Terrence Boyle handed over his badge and his handheld and was suspended before the airplane left. He kept saying it was 1 seat. He said it 4 or 5 times. What finally stopped him saying it was not the suspension, and it was not the review he had been protecting for 4 weeks. It was the number 14 read out loud by a duty manager in front of Ivy. And Ivy Okonkwo, 24 years old and 6 months on the job, went into the report as the employee who pulled the log. She had done it standing next to the man who wrote her schedule. She told her mother that night that she had been fairly sure it would cost her the job. Boyle found Denton once more, near the window, before they took him upstairs. "You could have just taken the other seat," he said. "I did take the other seat," Denton said. "You typed that I wanted it." Flight 1418 went to Boston 3 hours and 15 minutes late, with a new load sheet, a verified map, and a captain who signed it. The desk in Boston closed at 6:30. Flight 1418 landed at 7:40. At 9 o'clock that night, they were in an airport hotel with 2 beds and a window that looked at a parking structure. The box sat on the desk, unopened, still taped at the corners. Wren did not ask why they had missed it. She had been in the gate area. She had heard all of it. She said something else. "They wrote down that you said yes." Denton waited. "You didn't say yes." "No," he said. "I didn't." He reached into the inside pocket of the work coat and took out the boarding pass. Ivy had brought it up the jet bridge without being asked, folded exactly as he had left it, with the gate stamp and the time across the top corner. 2:11 in the afternoon. He handed it to his daughter. Wren smoothed it flat against her knee and read the whole thing. The seat number and the flight number and her father's name spelled right. Then she folded it back along the same creases because they were already there, and put it in the inside pocket of her backpack, in the sleeve where the presentation cards had been. A seat is a place a person sits for 2 hours. A record is what the world goes on saying about him after he stands up. Most people never have to learn the difference. The ones who do tend to learn it in a hallway, from somebody with a screen. He was back on the 11 to 7 shift Monday night, in the same coat, walking the same dark building. The list in the system was correct now. 14 entries had been reopened, and a man with an oil line in his right hand had been the reason. His daughter's name was still spelled right on a piece of paper folded twice, in a backpack, in the dark, on the chair beside her bed.